If you'd like to get early access to more videos like this and help decide what you'd like to see next, please consider joining the Patreon. The link is in the description. Hello everyone. Today is a very exciting day as Sodor Reading Between the Lines by Rev'd Awdry is being republished. This second edition is coming 20 years after the original. Reading Between the Lines was written back in 2005, partly as an updated version of the book written by Christopher's father and uncle, The Island of Sodor, Its People, History and Railways, which the publishers would not reprint despite the demand for it, and also partly as a statement about the railway series at the time. In 2005, no new railway series books have been published since New Little Engine in 1996, and most books were unavailable, with the TV series getting all the attention and the Awdrys being somewhat sidelined. Well, 20 years later it's back, and updated, and better than ever. Check out this tweet to see where it is available in your country. Bear in mind the list may have been updated since, and it may be available more widely than shown here. The original was only available as a paperback, but this edition is available in hardback and paperback, as well as in ebook form. The original was published by Sodor Enterprises, a company set up for Christopher to publish children's books based on railways, as the publishers were not interested in more railway series titles. These books are now almost all out of print, and most are very hard to find second-hand. Luckily, another publisher has been helping Christopher Awdry get these republished. After reading his military thriller books, Christopher Awdry approached M.L. Baldwin to help him with republishing Sodor Reading Between the Lines. He had also previously helped with getting some of the other Sodor Enterprise books digitised, and now many of these will be available in print and as ebooks. They are being released by Full Steam Ahead. Apparently, Christopher Awdry was unhappy to see Sodor Reading Between the Lines being sold for such high prices, and so to help people get his work at an affordable price, this new edition is being prepared. I managed to get my original copy for a good price back in the day, but completing my collection of the rest of his books has proved a much more expensive and much more time-consuming task than it needed to be. I'll put a link to the dedicated website for Christopher Awdry's books in the description. Now, the Lottie books, the Sandglass books, the Eastbourne Miniature Series and Wensleydale Railway books are all available as ebooks, and all are currently available in paperback. These editions may be a slightly different size to the originals, and with brighter illustrations, but otherwise will be exactly the same as before. The 6 individual Eastbourne books will also be coming out in one hardback collection in the future too. However, due to the contents being too close to the Railway series, Hugo Sliding cannot be republished. The specific reason is that it is too close to the Railway series format with life-size engines with faces. As most of the other books have no faces, they do not infringe on copyright. For the Eastbourne books, which do feature engines with faces, these miniature engines with the driver sat in them rather than standing on the footplate make them outside the infringement. If you want a copy of Hugo's Sliding, it is currently available via the Corris Railway website. So, back to Reading Between the Lines. The new edition is a reprint of the original, but with some updates and additions to bring it up to date. Some mistakes will also be corrected. Any lore that Christopher Awdry's son, Richard, has added to the series in his Sodor in 2025 talk will not be included. However, Richard has had some input to the book, as he helped with sharing some details from Rev'd Awdry that will be included. Some of these details that were revealed before the publication from Rev'd Awdry are the notes he supplied when reviewing the first draft of illustrations for Percy Takes the Plunge in the 8 Famous Engines, background to the writing of Very Old Engines, and a previously unreleased story, Thomas and the Police. Christopher Awdry has also briefly discussed the character of Barry, and also confirmed that Neil is still in working order, although not in regular service on Sodor. The publisher was keeping him updated on what fans wanted to know and confirmed that some information would be present in the book. In the build-up to publication date, a video with Christopher Awdry was shown, saying he had no idea the book was still so popular and he was very excited to see this reissue. His sister left a very sweet comment under the video. I think it's wonderful to see how involved with Sodor the family still are. The cover has an updated font and a 20th anniversary graphic, but otherwise features the same design as before. It features one of the Peter Edward map designs. Out of respect for Edwards, who died in 2017, Christopher Awdry did not want this design updated. Well, I think it's about time we take a look at the new edition of Sodor Reading Between the Lines. Okay, so before we go any further, 2 quick pieces of housekeeping. First of all, this review will contain spoilers, loads of them. If you don't want to be spoiled, turn back now until you have the book for yourself. Second, I pre-ordered the paperback and hardback versions of this book, but as of the time of recording, I only have the ebook to hand. So Full Steam Ahead have kindly sent me this photo of the prototypes from the printers, showing you how the two different versions look. Just to remind you though, the contents of all three books are identical. The first thing to notice when opening the book up is the new blurb on the inside. The first 3 paragraphs are identical to the original, but after that we get some new information. While the original understandably talks about the difficulties Christopher Awdry was having at the time with the condition of the Railway series in regards to the publishers, this updated version mentions his retirement to Dorset in 2014 after getting tired of book tours, railway events and press interest. However, a recent discovery of some of his father's memorabilia and dismay at the aftermarket prices for reading between the lines, the fact this is the 20th anniversary of the book and 80 years of the Railway series, these all seem like good reasons to release a second edition. The dedication remains the same, for Thomas lovers everywhere. The contents page of the original splits the book into 6 sections: the introduction, the island and its railways, characters in the stories, your frequently asked questions, the stories, their origin and location, and Thomas, a crown worth fighting for. This new edition has a 7th section, and finally, behind the curtain. Starting with the introduction. The origin of the Railway series serves as our introduction here, being developed around Christopher Awdry's bout of measles in 1942, with his father writing the stories he told him down. However, after the reins passed to Christopher, things start to become increasingly difficult with the lack of support from publishers, especially with some of Christopher's volumes and the Island of Sodor book, and so the need to write this book was brought about. The first proper section is the island and its railways. Here we first take a look at how Sodor was developed in real life by Wilbert and George Awdry, starting in the 1950s, and it shows how the island was planned as carefully as the stories, something the author notes is not necessarily the case in the television series. A key change here is that the section about the island having no coal mines is removed, due to Rev'd Awdry revealing that they have been discovered on the island at the northern tip earlier this year. Next follows a brief explanation of all the various steamwork railway lines on the island, from the oldest to the newest, and talks about the amalgamation of the North Western Railway and the various smaller gauge lines. One update here is that Neil is no longer listed as scrapped, but more on him later. Something that hasn't changed is the mention of slate mines being found near Godred. This was initially thought to be an error, as the mines in this area were known to be lead mines. However, its continued inclusion may mean that there is indeed slate at Godred. Next comes perhaps the most exciting section, the locomotives and other characters of the stories. We start with the standard gauge, beginning with the only pre-North Western Railway character, Neil. As I said before, the text now doesn't say he was scrapped, far from it, but he is in working order and is part of the Crovan's Gate Preservation Society. Starting with Thomas, we meet the North Western engines in turn, then the private engines, and then the various engines who have visited the line in the stories. These entries may have been slightly updated or corrected from the previous edition. There are still some missing profiles such as Spamcan, Class 40, the Patriot and Ginty and Pug, but these are all very minor characters. We then have the entries for the narrow gauge engines of the Scarlowy Railway, the 15-inch gauge Alsdale Railway and Coldefell Rack Railway, again with just slight updates and corrections. After the engines, we meet much of the named rolling stock of the standard gauge and then narrow gauge lines. Happily, we get a new entry for Alice and Mirabelle here. For missing characters, there is Victoria, who was not present for the original edition, and the Spiteful Brake Van. After these, we have descriptions of the non-rail characters. Of what I think we would consider the main 8, only George the Steamroller is absent. Finally, there is a new note about Barry. He was created as a standard 262 engine, whose book would have been released in the mid to late 1980s. However, stories outlined for him have been used for other characters in other books. There is another note called Sidetracked, stating that Christopher Awdry cannot comment on unknown characters and their fate since his influence on the series stopped in 2005. That draws the island and its railway section to a close, and we can now read about the characters in the stories. This section has had some updates, as unfortunately, unlike the friendly faces just mentioned, the human characters in the stories get old and then retire. We start with probably the most well known, the Fat Controller, where it is explained that we are now on to our 4th generation. This was revealed in the Sodor in 2025 talk, but it's good to have a bit more information. After stepping down in 2023, So Stephen Topham Hatt, the third Fat Controller, does not settle down entirely and instead opens the Crovens Gate Preservation Society. His son, Richard, becomes the fourth Fat Controller and presents Neil as a gift to his father for his new preservation movement. There are no other big updates in this chapter, so it seems like Sir Handel Lloyd Brown is still the owner of the Skarloey Railway at the age of 101 and has not yet passed this on to his son, Handel Coultrough. There is also no update for the small controller's entry, and several characters would be over 100 years old now have not been given a year of death. There must be something very heartening in the Sodor water, I suppose. Many of the characters from the books and stories are featured here. The only absentees of note are Ivan Farrier and Walter Richards. Next come the frequently asked questions. They are split up into various subsections. Firstly, books. These 13 questions mostly concern the trouble getting new books printed, but also address illustrators and illustrations, the history of how the series came to be, and that the stories are based on real events. An interesting update here is that all of Wilbert's scrapbooks with story ideas are now owned by Rev'd Awdry. Next, engines. Here some more technical questions are asked and answered about the engines. Originally there were 8 questions, but the updated edition adds 3 more. It explains that the Austerity engine is called Walter and is painted black, that there is not very much to say about Barry, and that the engine seen at the back of the shed in Thomas and the Tiger is an old, unknown engine. Then the island of Sodor. These look at how Wilbert and George developed Sodor based on the Isle of Man, and also mentions that Thomas and the Magic Railroad was filmed there. Initially, here there were 4 questions, but the new edition adds a 5th, explaining that there is now a museum on the island, the aforementioned CGPS. Next, and this should be good, TV/video. These 6 questions look at the successful early days, in the eyes of the Awdrys at least, of the TV series, and discuss the use of the names for Topham Hatt. Lastly for this section is general questions. These are mostly ones about the general life the Awdry family had, including favourite engines, how Christopher viewed his father, and who could take over the series. No new questions have been added to the 10 present here. However, the future of the Railway series is now not discussing passing the torch on to anyone else, but that the rights remain with the rights holders. The next section is the stories, their origin and location. This is by far the biggest section in the book, taking up over half the pages, and is invaluable when trying to work out where certain stories took place and the real events that inspired them. It is also here that we get some lovely images. The same ones from the 2005 version of Reading Between the Lines are present, but 2 have been added, one of Christopher looking happy on a boat in 2019, and one of him and his wife Helen. The original edition of Sodor Reading Between the Lines misses out the twin engines from this section. Happily, it is now included, along with the 2 books which came after the original edition, Thomas and Victoria, and Thomas and his Friends. The final section from the original is Thomas, A Crown Worth Fighting For. This section sets out the plight of Christopher Awdry and his family in 2005 to try and get the Railway series back on track. This has obviously had some revision in the meantime, addressing the 2 further books added to the series. But the passion from this section is inspiring, and I think all fans agree that yes, Thomas is indeed a crown worth fighting for. The last section is entirely new. And finally, Behind the Curtain shows the whole process of how a Railway series book came to be. It has prototype titles, such as The Adventures of James for James the Red Engine and Lakeside Engines for small railway engines. Rough descriptions of the plots, Walbert's hand-drawn illustrations, and guidance for his various illustrators of little details that need changing. Correspondence with the publishers, and, my favourite of all, plenty of maps. This section really has to be seen to be believed, and is worth the admission price on its own, so to speak. Finally, there is a representation of the Peter Edwards map from the cover. Unlike the original edition, this time it is in colour. Thanks for checking out this review, everyone. I really hope it is of interest. I really recommend getting a copy of this book, not only because it's great, but also to show the powers that be how much fans really care about this series. For $6.99 you can order the ebook, $11.99 for the paperback, and $16.99 for the hardback. Those are all the UK prices, by the way. Of course, any purchase is worthwhile, but the physical editions are what shops really take note of, and if the sales are good enough we may see these books back on shelves. You can also support Christopher Awdry by ordering some of his other books from Full Steam Ahead. The link will be in the description. Overall, this book is wonderful, and caps off a great 80th anniversary for the Railway series. I would recommend it to fans old and new, even if you have the 2005 version. I'd give it 5 out of 5 stars. Really reliable, the perfect update to a great little book. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the Patreon like these fine folk to help pick the next video subject, get early access to new content and help support the channel.